Jim Talent, let's get started and then we'll talk later. What did you think of the Ron DeSantis conversation? We're just going to go through the break.
Okay, great. Well, I really like DeSantis. I'm not in Switzerland as you are, or entirely in Switzerland. I think I want somebody who can win and win big. I think he could win upwards of 40 states. And then I want somebody who has the discipline and the focus and the record that shows they can get the job done. So I think those are 30,000-foot reasons for considering DeSantis very carefully, which I'm doing. I thought the interview was Ron DeSantis. I mean, he was knowledgeable. I think he was right on talking about building up our strength in Indo-PACOM and making the point that our actions in dealing with China, in other words, what we do, is going to be a whole lot more important than what we say. So, I was impressed, but I usually am when I listen to him.
I want to follow up on a lot of this, Jim Talent, so stand by. We're going to go to break, and then I'm going to continue to talk with you, and we'll attach it to the podcast. And I don't know if I've got a place to play it in the rest of the program today, but we will play it tomorrow if we don't, because I do think Jim Talent is maybe the most perceptive guy in D.C. to talk about matters military and political, and not used enough by the networks. So we're going to come back, talk with Senator Talent about the 2024 race right after this, and I'll post it in the podcast after the Ron DeSantis interview. And Hung Kao is also coming up next hour. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back. I'm talking with former United States Senator Jim Talent for the podcast today. I just interviewed Ron DeSantis, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, and Senator Talent is not as much in Switzerland as I am. But I don't debate people. I don't argue with them. I interview them. I would have debated him about Tommy Tuberville if I was a presidential candidate, because I really hate this hold, Senator Talent. What do you think about the hold that Senator Tuberville has on every general officer and admiral in general?
Yeah, well, we've talked about it before. You and I are particularly sensitive to the internal equities of the Department of Defense. That sounded very Washingtonese, but we know what this kind of a hold, the impact that it has, particularly if it's sustained for a long time. Now, I would be a lot more sympathetic to it if we did not have a legislative vehicle available every year in order to accomplish the objective the senator wants to accomplish, which is a very good one. So what we have to hope is that what he's doing is going to provide additional leverage to the House negotiators in the conference on the NDAA, and it may very well do that. So that would be a real plus.
It's in the House bill. It's in the House. I think he should just declare victory and go home. He's going to get a vote.
Right. Or find a way to stand down at this point and then maybe use that tactic as potential leverage down the road during the conference report. Now, the advantage of what Tuberville's done, and I think you and I he's highlighted the issue. I mean, he's made the issue more visible, which is important. This is a very extreme policy. You've heard Tom Cotton. In fact, I think he said it on your show. So right now we have a Department of Defense that will pay people and subsidize their hotel costs to travel for abortions, but they won't subsidize you if you're going home for your father's funeral. So, at least he's made the issue more visible.
All right. Now, going back to the Governor DeSantis interview. He does not underestimate Xi Jinping's willingness to go first strike against American assets. What'd you make of that answer?
Well, he's absolutely correct. And as a matter of fact, now, of course, as a presidential candidate, regardless of who we're talking about, you have to be a little bit careful when you talk about what we would do in the event of a Chinese first strike. I mean, that's the idea that you don't want to tie your hands, commit yourself. You have to be a little bit careful. You and I are not in that position, okay? And I will tell you, if the balloon goes up in Taiwan, I think the possibility of a Chinese first strike of some kind is very high. They are planning on the assumption that we're going to defend Taiwan. And war moves very quickly. So the possibility that they will strike some of our assets, like Andersen Air Force Base in Guam, or our bases in Japan, or our command and control, or our satellite architecture, in order to keep us from responding, is very, very high. And there's been a lot of writing by people, experts like our friend Jerry Hendricks, about what's going to happen in the nature of war in this day and age. In other words, you want to strike, particularly at your opponent's command and control, before they can strike at yours. So all of this is by way of saying that a first strike is very possible, which is why deterrence is essential. And DeSantis was right to emphasize that.
Do you think Governor DeSantis is right in saying he thinks the split in the Republican Party on Ukraine is 50-50? I thought it was 70-30 or 60-40 in favor of all-out aid. He said, no, it's 50-50. What do you assess it at, Senator Talent?
You know, it's funny. We did a survey on this, and you had a great interview with Rachel Hoff from the Reagan Institute a couple of weeks ago. If I had to guess, I think it's somewhere probably in between what you said and what he said. I think people want the result he talked about is a result I think most Republicans would be very happy with, which is an end to the war. Nobody wants a stalemated battlefield going on indefinitely, and an end that does not reward Russian aggression and stabilizes Europe. I think that's what he's for. The question is how we get there, particularly given that Putin has shown no signs that he wants to stop, or that he knows how he can stop without threatening his own regime. So it's a difficult problem, and we're in it because we failed to deter conflict in Eastern Europe. You know, I've said on the show before. I've said on the show before. You know, as of I believe it was 2013, we didn't have a working tank left in Europe. That's how far we drew down NATO. So of course we were, and then of course 2014, you get the first Russian aggression against Crimea.
Now, Senator, I want to end by bringing up what I read last night. I was rereading Douglas MacArthur biography, American Caesar by William Manchester, and I'm always astonished at how unprepared we were for World War II. Clark Air Force Base, 9 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, all of our bombers were still grumped together and were taken out by the Imperial Japanese Air Force. Do you think the American people have any idea where we are vis-a-vis conflict with China, which I think is very close and getting closer every day?
Well, now you run into my eternal optimism about the American people, which I think is proven out during my career. I think they do have a sense that we're in real danger and we need to do something. I think the problem here is in Washington, on both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, although Congress has been much better in the last 4 or 5 years on this issue, and the Department of Defense, which needs to knuckle down, decide how it is going to defend Taiwan, decide what it needs to defend Taiwan, and then move vigorously with accountability at the highest levels in the E-ring to get the assets in place that we need. And this is basically what Mike Gallagher is saying to you, what Tom Cotton is saying to you, what Jerry Hendricks says to you in every one of their interviews. And I don't think the department has come to grips, particularly under the current leadership, with what we need to do. So we're not sending the right signals to Taiwan. And what we do is more important than what we say.
Amen to that. Senator Talent, thanks for your patience. We're going to put this on the podcast afterwards, and then I'll talk to Senator Cotton exactly about these same issues. Thank you for joining us today, Jim.
Okay.